Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Sarah Mitchell, head of our documentation department. Today, Sarah is going to be doing a demonstration about using Alpha Anywhere with Git and GitHub. And we're also here, of course, to answer your questions. So you could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Let's begin. Hello, Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, and it looks like you're already the presenter. So as soon as you start on your screen, I'll let you know.
Can you see it?
It is, and I see Waffles. Thurston Waffles III, I believe, is the name of that cat. Is that right?
Thurston Waffles.
Fantastic.
Hey, there we go.
All right.
All right, welcome. Okay, so before we get started on today's presentation, I just want to thank everyone for being here. And as we are going through the webinar today, feel free to type in your questions in the questions box at any time, whenever it pops into your head. And if we don't get to your question, by all means, email guides@alphasoftware.com afterwards. And then also, if you haven't done so yet, register for DevCon. Here's the link. It's coming up soon. I'm really excited for it.
You can still save $300 if you order before the end of the month. Although I suspect almost everyone here today already has their DevCon ticket because they're smart and ahead of the curve.
Oh yes, yeah. If you've already purchased, you made great savings. No, do sign up. I'd love to see you there. We have a lot of great content coming up this year, and I'm excited for it. So that's where you can register. And then today we're talking about source control. This is a topic I like to talk about a lot because I think everyone should use it, not just for software development. It can apply to a lot of things. And this is sort of leading off of what Dion mentioned last week with Alpha Anywhere's Git and GitHub integration. And I just wanted to talk today about what source control is, why it's useful, why you should use it, and then go over a lot of things that I strongly recommend that you should know, or at least educate yourself on if you're going to use it, if you're going to use Git or GitHub. So just to start, source control, what is it? It's a system for tracking changes to documents. So your text documents, code files, changes to images, really any type of file that you save. Source control can track those changes to a file over time and create a history of them. And that whole system of tracking those changes is called a repository. The repository has your files. It also has all of the version history associated with those files. And the repository is, it can be on your machine. It can be up on a private server somewhere. It could be a web service like GitHub. And it's really where all the magic happens. And I just have this note here on this page that repo is repository in this presentation. So why? I've mentioned that it tracks changes to your files over time, but there's a lot of cool things you can do with source control. You can undo those changes because it tracks what changed. It knows how to undo that, how to go backwards in time. With source control, you can do things like collaboration very easily because you have that undo capability. Multiple people can work on a file, and not only can you track what happens to that file, but you can roll back changes, you can branch them, you can experiment fearlessly, which is, I think, a huge benefit. There's no concern at all when using source control that if you make a change to a file and utterly wreck your project, you can always undo, roll back, discard everything you did, and get back to a working state. That's like a really big thing. I'm sure everyone has had the experience of working on something, a document, a component, and things just going south and having to sit there and try to remember what you did so you can get back to some working state so you can move forward. And if you're using source control, it's as simple as just undoing, just right-clicking and undoing all changes on a file to get out of that state. Now we're going to talk about Git and GitHub today because that's the source control system that Alpha Anywhere integrates with, but Git is just one of a myriad of options. There's Perforce, Mercury, Subversion, Bitbucket, which I think is built off of Mercury. These are all source control systems. Each system manages files and changes differently, and that does affect how the workflow works with those systems. A good example is Perforce. I have a lot of experience with that. The way working with Perforce worked was we would check a file out, flagging it as, I have this, I'm making changes to it, and then when I'm done, I commit those back, and then somebody else could check the file out and work on it later. So that was sort of like a singular central repository. You just pull down the one thing you want to work on and then push those changes back up. Other systems like Git do a system where your files are cloned locally, so you make all your changes locally, and then you merge them back up with the main branch that everybody else is working off of. So I mentioned we're going to talk about Git and GitHub today, and I just want to clarify two important things, and that is the difference between these two things. Git is a source control system. It's the technology that tracks all the changes and does the version control and history and everything. GitHub is a service that hosts Git servers. They're a web service. You sign up. It's free. I really recommend using it. And they just host the Git servers for you to use for your projects. If you want to create a GitHub repository, and I'm going to say GitHub repository because of how their UI on their website is laid out. It's really a Git repository, but we'll call it GitHub repository. You have to go to GitHub's website and create an account, and it's free. When you make a repository, there are two types of repositories you can create with GitHub. You can create a public repository, which makes every file you ever add to it ever publicly visible to the entire world. And then there are private repositories, which cannot be seen publicly. You have to be a member of the repository in order to even see any of the files in it, which I recommend if you're going to go the route of GitHub to start private. You can always go public, but you cannot go the other direction. And the other really cool thing now too is it's not recent. I think this change has been around for a while, but GitHub used to only let like a few, like 5 collaborators work on private repositories, but they've lifted that restriction. So there's no reason for you to not have private repositories. There's no concern anymore about maybe I need to keep it public to keep my private repositories open. You can do that unlimited now. And you can also, it's very easy to invite and work with collaborators through GitHub. So with Alpha Anywhere, you can connect any project to a repository, either a Git or a GitHub repository. And those repositories are created within your projects. Any project can be turned into a Git or GitHub repository, and any new project can be created as a Git repository or can be cloned from an existing GitHub repository. And when you're setting all of this stuff up with GitHub, you just need 3 things. You need the URL of where your repository is. You need your GitHub username. And you need a personal access token. And this is new as of this month. So let's go take a look at that. So up here in GitHub, this is my account. And here I've got repositories. These are the repositories in my account. Some of them are private. This one's private. These ones are public. But all of these, when you can easily create a new one here. And when you create a new repository, you just need to enter your name, an optional description, which probably recommend doing that just so you know why you created it. And then down here is where you pick if it's public or private. I recommend choosing private. Excuse me. You can always make it public. You can't go the other way. So start private and then decide if you want to go public. And then down here, there's some optional things you can start with. If you're setting this up to take an existing web project and put it in GitHub, I recommend leaving it empty, and this will just help eliminate some of the merging issues that come up when trying to put an existing project into GitHub. So if there's already files in the repository, you have to merge them into your workspace and then add your workspace and then push that back up. So if you start with a blank one, it's much easier. Let's go ahead and do a Git demo here. Excuse me. So this is, it's that simple. This is my new repository. It's private. You'll see a bunch of things up here that GitHub offers in addition to just basic tracking your changes and stuff. They've got issues. There's this thing called pull requests, which sort of, it works. People make a change and they send you a pull request, and then you review it and decide whether or not you want to integrate that into your project. And that's the intention of how that works. Actions, I think, are workflows and stuff triggered by when people commit things. You can also add a wiki to this if you wanted to, that has like a description of how your project works. There's some security insights. And then settings is where you would go if you wanted to invite people to work with you. I think that's under here. Oop. Is it manage access? It's got to be manage access. Let's go look at manage access. See if I can remember my password. There we go. All right, so in manage access is where you can invite collaborators. You can invite anybody who's on GitHub. All you need to know is their username. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. You can set up email notifications for when stuff happens. And then also here on the main settings page down at the bottom in the danger zone, should you decide you want to make your repo public, this is where you would do it. It's a one-way trip, so keep that in mind. So that's creating it. Once you've created your repository, if your plan is to hook this up into Alpha Anywhere, which I'll show, you need either this URL up here or this URL right here for the repository URL. So let's go back here into Alpha Anywhere, which I've already got running here. And let's make a new project. And I'll pick create from a GitHub repository. So this is URL. I'll give it a name. And then down here, we need two things. We need your username. And it says here that username and password are required for private repositories, but if you plan on doing any pushing of changes to your repository, you do need to include your username and password to make those changes. And then here, I don't mean password. This is a personal access token. This is a change that's been coming for a while. They've been talking about it for a while up on GitHub. It's a token you generate on your account. And here's an article they've written about it. But basically what you do is you go into settings, into your developer settings, and you create a personal access token. So if we go back over to GitHub, into our Git demo, and we go check here. This is my account. I go into settings, in developer settings, personal access tokens. You'll see I have one here already. Now, this is one I've created already to use with Alpha Anywhere. You can generate as many tokens as you want. Let's make one here for custom expiration tomorrow. Give it repo. You need repo in order to do push and pull to commit any files or pull any files from it. And I believe that's all you need. There's a bunch of other settings here that let you do things like set up GitHub action workflows remotely and that kind of stuff. But Alpha Anywhere just does basic push and pull access. So you're going to generate your token. You're going to copy your token. you're going to save it somewhere so that you don't lose it, because you can't get it once you've generated it. If you lose it, you got to make a new one. And that's what you put in this password field. So once you've created all that, your project is set up and ready to go. So at this point, I can start adding files here. And let's just do a basic UX component. Let's grab something in here that looks interesting. Ad hoc SQL query builder. Let's do that. Let's say this is my project I want to create. So, whoops. I'm going to save that. And now if we go back to the web projects control panel, there's my file. Notice it's colorized. This is indicating to me that it is an untracked file, meaning it's new. It's not in the system. Git is not tracking it. There's no history about it. So this would be something that I would need to add if I want it to be tracked in source control. So let's do that. I will go through the Git menu here, either clicking here or I believe clicking here. Nope, that doesn't work anymore. All right, so click up here on that Git menu. This is the interface. You're going to see untracked files that are new are going to be down here. Files you are tracking, these are things that are in the source control system, will be up here. If you want to add them, you have to select them. So they are highlighted. And then I recommend providing useful commit messages just so that you know what that change was. So this is like my first add. I've just added it. There's no difference between this and anything before it. So we'll add that. And this is telling me what happened. It did a initial commit of the SQL query builder. That's the message. One file was changed. No insertions, no deletions. Insertions and deletions refers to the changes within the file. So there aren't any because this is a new file being added. And then here, it's telling me what it created is that ad hoc SQL query builder, hey 5WCMP, close. So I've added the file locally. And now I can use this little command up here to push up to GitHub. And this will take this file and send it up to the internet and put it up in GitHub where anybody else who's working with me on that project can then access it. And that's what this is showing here. It's saying it's sending the file up to gitdemo.git. That's where the repository is located. And it's submitting my local master to the master branch up there. I only have one branch. We'll mention branching later, but basically that's all you need to do. If we go back and check here in our Git demo here, we now have one file. That's the initial commit. And if I had anybody else working with me at this point, they could get that file from here and do what they need with it. And I've lost my presentation. There we go. So that's setting up. We just walked through this. This is the basic workflow of using GitHub. You have a local copy of the repository, and then you have a remote copy, which is your master copy. It's the main one that everybody works from. That's what lives up on GitHub. And so locally, you do things like you add files or delete files or modify files, and those all end up in a staging area before you commit them. The staging area is just picking which files you want to save to the version history, which is your local repo. And this all happens locally. And then you have these two commands, push and pull. Push sends those changes up, pull pulls down any changes that are already up there. The general workflow, the easier way to think about it is you make a change, you commit your change locally, you pull down any changes first from the remote repository and merge those, just because if you're collaborating with other people, they may have committed something while you were working. And then once you've done that, you push your changes up and you repeat, you do it again. So really important point everybody needs to understand here, and that is component files cannot be merged manually. Only one person can work on a component at a time. If somebody is working on a component and makes a change, and you make a change, and you get a merge conflict, you have to back your change out, accept theirs, and reapply your changes manually. There's no good way to handle this with Alpha Anywhere component files. So keep this in mind. It's very important. If you are running your own private Git server or are confident in your skills, there are some extensions out there, some Git extensions that add a concept called file locking. And what file locking is it prevents anybody from committing changes to a file if somebody has locked it. So that's a thing you might want to look at if you have a lot of people that need to work on your project and this is sort of becoming an issue. Looking into what options exist for file locking would be a good idea. With any source control system, there's a lot of things that you can do wrong and there's a lot of things you can do right. Some things that I recommend doing if you are using source control, besides using source control, is to commit early and commit often. And what this means is you make changes, small changes in small batches so that it's easy to roll back something if you don't want to keep it. Don't commit broken code, always commit working code. Have meaningful commit messages so you know what the change is without having to dig into the code. And then also learn your source control tool. Alpha Anywhere's integration is very basic. These two commands here up here, the push and the pull, and then also this commit. This is it in terms of Alpha Anywhere of what has been integrated into the product. If you need to do stuff like branching or stashing, and which I'll touch on later, that's not accessible through this interface here. The most you have is git push pull, locally committing, and then there's a few things you can customize here. You can customize the commands for push pull. If you have a private server that you're using for Git, then this is where you can customize that to refer to your server. You can also come in here and update your username and password or customize the color coding here in the UI for tracked, untracked, and modified files. But that's the extent of the integration within Alpha Anywhere of Git. Before we get on to some really useful things to know, I want to just highlight some bad practice. Never commit API keys to your source control repository. The history tracks all changes. If you commit an API key, it's in the history. It's in it forever. It doesn't matter if you delete it later. It's there. Anyone can see it. And that's why I recommend starting with private repositories as opposed to public repositories up on GitHub, because it's very easy to accidentally do this with some of the UI elements in Alpha Anywhere. For example, we have a setting to put the Google Maps API key in the map control, which is very convenient. But if you save your component to a public repository with that setting in your map control and the UX component, your API key is now exposed to everyone. And you will get an email from GitHub saying you did that, because I did that by accident to Dion once after he sent me some components after a webinar. So don't commit API keys. Be very conscious about what's in those files. The Google Maps API key can be put in the project settings, and then your project settings can just be left out of source control. You can just not put it in there. Don't work on the same component as someone else at the same time. That's bad news bears. You're going to have a bad day if you do that. Don't commit a whole bunch of changes in one go. If you've made a mistake in there that you need to back out, you'll have to back out all of those changes. And then you have to manually parse through all that stuff you've backed out to figure out what you need to put back in. So commit early, commit often means as small as a change as you can. Don't commit broken code. People get mad when the project doesn't work. Don't commit incomplete files. If you've added something that requires a dependency, make sure you're including that dependency. Have meaningful commit messages. Don't just say changes. And then also do use source control. I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make, even if you do everything above, is not using it. It offers so many benefits and can save you from so many problems. Even running a Git repository locally, not using GitHub, can offer so much for you in your development. I mentioned before, Alpha Anywhere performs just the basic push-pull commit, and it does merge, but it does easy mode, meaning if the merge is easy, it happens automatically. If it's not easy, then you got to do it manually. So this is the basic stuff, but if you have more advanced needs, like maybe you want to do a branch or stash a change so you can work on something else and then bring that back, you're gonna have to use more advanced tools like GitHub Desktop or learn the command line. I like to use both of these things. You don't have to use GitHub. As I mentioned, you can have a local Git repository right on your development machine. Highly recommend. You can set up a private server if you have that access. If you don't want to use Git, you can use whatever source control that you want to, as long as you're using it. It's really the main point. And what I want people to do is to make sure you're using source control because of all the benefits that it can give you. But if you are using Git, I've assembled a list of 18+1 useful Git commands that you should know, or at least know of, so you can go research them later if you need them. They're not really in any particular order. So I just put them up here. A little brief description of each one. I'm not going to show examples of all of this stuff today because this could take a very long time. But some basic stuff to know about. Git config up front and center. If you work on the command line, something that gets really annoying really fast is having to enter your personal authentication token or whatever over and over and over and over and over again every time you do a commit. So git config is a way to store and set that information so you don't have to keep doing that. Init is how you create a new repository. Clone is how you copy an existing repository from a remote server down to your machine. Add is how you add a file. Commit saves those files you've added into the version history of your local repository. Diff is a way to look at the differences between files. Reset is a way to roll back either files you've staged but decided you don't actually want to put those, don't want to commit those right now, or even unstaged commits you've added. Just as a side note, if you push your commits, your local commits up to the master branch, there's a different process required to undo. So it's nice to be able to catch those mistakes earlier if you can use reset to undo them. Otherwise, there's a complicated process of using checkout to pull things out. Status, Git status will give you a list of everything you've staged, everything that's changed, everything that's untracked. RM is short for remove. It's how you remove a file. The log displays a version history. Show displays some metadata for a specific commit. If you're working on the command line, the log shows you stuff like the commit ID and the message, but it might not show you the who did it. So show will get you that information. Tag is nice if you are using Git and you want to say like, oh, right, this is the version of all the files that we've released to the customer as version 1.6. You can use tag to put a tag on all the files at that point in time as 1.6, so you know exactly what files were included in that launch. An alternative way to using tags to track files you've launched is to branch. Branch is a way to create or delete a branch. Branching is fantastic. I recommend learning how to use that. Checkout lets you switch between branches. Merge lets you merge changes from a branch to the current branch. And within the Git system and GitHub, a branch can be your local repository and the remote repository. Those are considered two separate branches. So when you merge something from the master up on the remote down to your local repository, that's considered a Git merge. And then you have push and pull, which is what Alpha Anywhere will do for you. And then my favorite one here at the bottom, Git stash, which I've used a lot, lets you take all of the changes you have, save them off somewhere, and revert everything back to the last commit. So it's like undo, but you still get to keep your changes around. So imagine somebody has a problem and you realize you need to go work on this file, but you're in the middle of doing something and nothing is working, but you know where you need to go from there. You can git stash everything you're working on and then go off and fix that other issue, commit that, and then unstash your files and pick up from where you left off. And there's no risk of accidentally mingling changes from your stash into those into that fix. So I find this to be very useful. And then the final one, the plus one, Git remote. On extremely rare occasions, we've seen Alpha Anywhere just forgets your remote server, and Git remote lets you set that. Say like, oh, it's this URL. So something to keep in mind if you see an issue with the Alpha Anywhere not knowing where GitHub is. And that's a lot of stuff to take in. So I located a cheat sheet for everyone. And I'm gonna paste the link in the chat here. Chat. In fact, let's go to that website right now. Here it is. This is the cheat sheet. This is some basic stuff to know. It covers most of everything I've mentioned right now. It talks about how you make changes, how you can redo commits. All of this happens on the command line, how you can configure the tool. And if you delete all this stuff at the top and go to training.github.com, these cheat sheets are available in other languages, if that's something that matters to you or is important. So you can get these in other copies. They have PDF versions as well that you can print. This is the English one. But I always have a cheat sheet handy when I'm working with GitHub and Git on the day-to-day. And then a final thing to note is a really great tool that I've used and is actually one that we use in our app flow workflow for mobile app development in our videos, is GitHub Desktop. It's a free tool from GitHub. You can use it to work with local Git repositories, GitHub Git repositories. It's very easy to perform most operations in it. I have it here. What's it open on? I've got it on my Alpha Anywhere documentation project right now, but here's the diff showing me a bunch of stuff. See if I can find one here. Here's one showing the difference between two images that have changed. This is the old one, this is the new one. This one's showing text changes in an article. I really recommend using this, particularly for the diffing. On the command line, it's just red and green text on a black background, but in here you can actually split these things out side by side even. Split, there we go, and look at them, and then come in here and be like, no, I didn't want that change, get rid of it. So this tool is great. It's very easy to add a repository in here, either locally created or create a new one. It's got all the branching stuff is built into it. Actions on your repository. Quick link to go view your project on GitHub. So yeah, the GitHub Desktop. And you can find that on GitHub's website. And so that's my presentation, really fast, really quick. But now I'd like to open up for questions that anybody might have about either what we covered or really anything.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sarah. One person asked, can you show us an example of setting up GitHub for an existing project? How would you go about doing that?
For an existing project?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. That one. Let's use that one.
All right.
Sure. Let's do that. So this, when you set this up, you can, there's two ways you could go about this. You could try to take the project you have and do all the conversion within that project. But the method that I have found that is easiest is to take, so we'll go up to GitHub, we'll go back here, we'll make a new one here. We'll call it list control layouts course. We'll make it private. We'll create a blank one. And the easiest method to do this would be to, well, let's try it the hard way. Let's first make it a Git repository. Okay, so that added a Git ignore file. And then these are all green because they're staged. But they haven't been committed yet, which is why they're green. So Alpha Anywhere adds them for staging, but they're not committed yet. I believe at this point, if you come into the Git settings and you register your GitHub repository, first by setting your username, password, which I'm going to do over here.
So the question is, when you enter in the password earlier, you weren't actually entering your GitHub password, you were entering in an authentication token that you generated for that particular repository.
Yeah.
And so does the same apply in this case too?
Yeah, it's always the personal access token.
Okay.
Register that remote. So at this point, so what I just did, I went in here to change the remote. I added that URL to that course I just made. And then I believe at this point, if I commit these, call it initial commit. Oop, got to select these, commit them. Those were added. I think if I do a push at this point, it should just work. No, it did not. So I got to do this command here to set the upstream branch. So this didn't work. So the other method which I was going to recommend was to first create a new project from an existing repo with your project name. Oops. Can I get that in there? Give it a name. And so at this point, what I would do now that this is connected, I think this will just show me a weird result. Yeah. There's no files up there to pull down. But at this point, I would copy the project files over from here. And we just want the component files. So I'll copy those and I'll go down here to my list, paste those in here. They will appear in here. And then I can come into here, select them all, but not that one. Add them. Push them up, and now they'll be up there.
Oh, and there they are. So make a blank repository, and create a new
copy things over
project, and and connect that. Make a blank project using that Git repository, and then copy your files over, and then paste them up. And in this case, you just are grabbing the web components. Now, are there any other project settings or anything like that that you'd want to take with you when you're copying that over, even if you're not going to commit them to Git?
I mean, you could just copy the entire project.
You just get the whole shooting match if you want. But
Yeah, if you
probably
wanted
not
to,
the
you could
Git
just come
threads.
here and just copy everything if you wanted. I could just come in here and grab all that stuff.
Okay.
I've lost where I'm at. Here we go. Skip those files. So you can copy all that stuff in there, and then when you come in here to Elf Anywhere, commit them. This is just going to show you the files that aren't listed in the git ignore. I did leave out the git ignore. I should talk about that briefly. So
that was going to be my next
yeah. So there's a there's this file .gitignore that you can put in your Git repository, and what it says, what it is a list of files to never track, to never commit. And we have a set of files already that we recommend not tracking in here. And that includes things like the backup, deleted, and undo folders, because using source control, you don't need those. Component info, component type cache, these are not required to track it all. Elf Anywhere can just remake them as needed. The star.underbar a5w star, the 5w cmp star files are manifest files that are compiled from the components, so you don't need to track those. And then we have a few other things. We have like a staging folder. There's some sort of A5 docgen, live test settings. These are just local things that cache information for doing stuff like live testing or report generation that are absolutely do not need to be in source control. And you can also add things here too as you want. Like, let's add new, well, duplicate, easy. Whoops. Clicked on node. Duplicate. Duplicate. There we go. Say I didn't want to track the file I just created. I could come in here and right click on it and just say add to the ignore list. And then if we went and looked at the ignore list, double clicking that opens it, you'll see it was added here. So yeah.
Wow, very cool. I know that you covered this before, or briefly a moment ago, in GitHub Desktop, but can you show what to do when you realize that you've committed a file, but what you committed is not really what you wanted to do, and you want to roll back to an earlier version?
From what point? Have we?
Maybe from the last commit, or from. In other words, you pushed something up to GitHub and you realized, oh boy, I made a big mistake in this component.
All right, if you've pushed it up to GitHub, all right. I'm gonna Google it. Redo. Here we go. I'd actually have to look this up, which would require some Googling. I've had to do that before, and it's not as simple as running reset. I believe the workflow is you have to do a checkout. So you have to check out that file at a particular point in time. So where am I?
Oh, that was the other thing, is could you see a demo of using the command line with Git?
Yeah. So this is the command line. This is which one is this? Git bash. I like it, there's colors in it. So I'm in my workspace for documentation. So if I do something like git status, it's gonna dump a massive list of files that are changed, that aren't tracked, that have been deleted. And here's like, this one's been modified. I've deleted all of these ones. And then down here, untracked files, everything in here is new. This is all the new stuff. So here you can use commands like git add, let's see here. Let's do git add transform helper files, how to star. Now if I run git status, show the difference here. And this is very long. So that command added every single file that was inside the how-to folder at this location.
Okay.
So if I decided I didn't want to do that here, I could do like a git restore.
Mm-hmm.
Oop. Hopefully this doesn't totally. Let me double check that commit. Unstage. So I can use git restore -- stage and then file. I'll go down here, git restore stage star. Unstage all of them. And so they've. Oh no, that didn't work. Let's do them manually. Git status stage. Transform. Help files. How to star. So those are now down here. And I go back up to my stage, there's nothing in it. It's empty.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very cool. All right, a couple more questions, and then we're almost out of questions. So if anyone wants to submit some more, not just about Git, but about other Alpha Anywhere stuff, you could go ahead and type that into the questions box at the GoToWebinar control panel. But the next question is, can you tell us a little bit about how you might put together an app that has got API settings, but in a way that you're not going to be storing those API settings maybe in the component or a component that you would commit to GitHub, for example? Like what might be a good best practice for keeping your API settings? I think you had mentioned something about keeping them in the project settings.
Yeah, so project properties has a bunch of settings in here where you can put things like your Google Maps API keys, geocoding, down here in email somewhere. Where is email?
Ah, okay.
Email is where you can put your Spark post or SendGrid API key stuff. Another option too is also to put it in like an application global variable, which I think this is a new. Oh no, this is not it. Sorry. Global settings settings table. This is new, but you could set up a table in a database that had that information in it, and then your app could query it. I'd like to start when it launches and put it in session variable or something like that to use.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so does that get pulled in just as it's being published? Is that the idea? Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Like programmatically fetch it from somewhere that's safe.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Which might be local.
Which
or,
isn't
yeah.
is not a public repository. Now, if you're using a private repository, it's fine. Keep in mind you can never make it public.
Right.
And there is a massive risk at putting API keys in any repository.
Right, exactly. So it's just not a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can avoid it, yeah. If you find a place that it seems like we're not providing a good way to do that, send us a bug report. We'll fix it.
Okay, very good. So two more questions here. One is, can you talk a little bit about branches and how they would be used?
Yes.
And,
so
and also, as a bonus, can you show how to do that maybe in GitHub Desktop? Maybe not a full thing,
yeah,
like that.
let's do that.
Okay.
So let's see here. Where'd Alpha Anywhere go? Oh, I'm staring at it. I need this guy. So first I'm gonna add that repository that we created. in here. Select folder, add repository. There we go. So there's our repository. This is what's in it. And the question was branching. How would you do that here? So let's start by adding this guy. Commit that guy. Push to origin. So now we're all in sync up on GitHub. So within here, it's really easy to create a branch. You can either do it from here or from this menu up here and select new branch. And let's see here, we're doing fictional alpha everywhere. There we go. So that was easy. Just create a new branch. So I've got 2 branches. They have all the same files in them. But any changes I make here will not be in the master branch. So I'm working on this branch, which probably isn't going to show up here. So I'm going to click here just to make sure. On branch, so get status here, on branch alpha everywhere. So all these changes that I make here are going to be in that branch at this time. So maybe I want to, yeah, let's do this. Maybe we're doing a big change. We're gonna just totally redo our front-end customer UI. And so what you could do is work off in a branch while people are still developing on your main product, while you build out that thing. Because maybe it's going to take you 6 months to put together, right? You're going to just redo all the branding, everything. And you want to be able to work on that side by side with whatever anybody's working on right now. So you could branch and work on the project separately without affecting anything in your main code base. And when you're ready to ship that, merge everything back into main. So let's pretend here that we've made a really cool, brand new branding everything Aqua Alpha. We'll just save this here. And this is our main app. It's the main interface. So there's an inherent understanding from the development team that no one's going to work on this, or that any changes done to this component on the development branch that's currently active for your product will also be made in your branch. So there's going to be some merging that has to happen there, and you have to be careful about it. But you make all these changes you've done on your branch. Let's go commit that. Okay. See, alpha everywhere, new app branding. We've changed one file. There were a great many changes and deletions for that single change. So we've now drifted. Alpha everywhere has gone in a direction separate from our main branch. So let's assume that we're done. I want to merge those back in. So you can then, after you're done with your branch, merge it. And I'm trying to remember how to do that. Let's publish it up to a remote repository too. All right, so once you've finished development, you want to push everything back, because I think that's where everybody wants to go with this. You need to take this branch and commit those changes back to master. So I believe through this interface, I'm wondering if I can do it from here. Merge into current branch, merge into master, alpha everywhere. This will merge one commit for alpha everywhere into master. So using this interface, I can say, I need to take all the changes here, merge them back into my master branch, create a merge commit. And if there are no conflicts, this will just happen seamlessly. So I do recommend as you go along in a branch, just to ensure just the minimum amount of pain when you go to merge back, to constantly be merging changes from master to your branch, just to make sure everything stays in sync, so that when you pull those things back together, your branch has everything everybody's working on plus all your new stuff. So coming back should be very seamless and simple, because you've already done all the work over time to make sure you've integrated things people are working on into your new product. Is that clear as mud?
I think it's clearer than mud even. Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
Sarah.
So, and then
No,
push to
great.
origin. So
You had said something about, don't commit broken code. That was one of
yeah,
your
please don't do that.
So you're
Yeah.
working on something, you've broken it, right? But you also have to leave for the day, and you realize that it needs to be saved, backed up someplace. Maybe you need to get to it from another computer. Is this where you're talking maybe about stashing stuff, or is that something?
Stash will stay local. So
Stash will stay local
if you need it somewhere else and it's broken, that's a perfectly fine use for a branch.
For a branch.
Just
Okay, we'll
create a
call this
branch
the
temporarily,
broken
put it up,
branch while I fix
pull
this.
it down where you need it, continue working, merge it back into master. You can delete branches. Deleting a branch doesn't purge it from history, so it'll still exist in the history.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. In fact, I think next, got it. There's a cool graphic somewhere. Maybe it's up here. I'll have to find it somewhere. There's a really cool visualization that GitHub provides, where it shows you where requests have gone and come back in. There's no data here yet. So unfortunately, I should have looked that up before, just so you can show you guys, but you can kind of see where things have gone over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
We have one email, not Git related, but it has to do with an email someone sent into guides regarding their XBasic library. When they publish it, it seems to hold on to a previous version as if it's getting cached, and so it's not running the old. It's not running the newly updated code. We will go take a look at that over at guides at the end of the webinar. Thanks for sending that in, though. And that looks like about it for questions. Good, because we're just about out of time. Sarah, thank you very much for showing us this presentation today. Very much appreciate it. Thanks everyone who attended and asked questions. If you do have more questions, of course, you can send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Until then, take care, stay well. We hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye.